Good morning. Today's date is Wednesday, April 16th, 2003. My name is Michael Yusenko. The Union Township Historical Society is pleased to present this videotape program on historic homes in Union County, New Jersey. We are fortunate to have historians Jean Ray Turner and retired Professor Robert Freelington, Kane University, providing commentary about the Woodruff House located at 111 Conan Street, Hillside, the Belcher Ogden House located at 1046 East Jersey Street, Elizabeth, Liberty Hall located at 1003 Morris Avenue, Union, and the Cannonball House located at 126 Morris Avenue, Springfield. William Froelich will be our video cameraman and technician in charge of producing this videotape. Our goals are to educate school children, Boy and Girl Scout groups, senior citizens, and the general public about Union County history. We must study our past in order to understand our present culture with the hope of improving the future for our children and American society. Funding for this project was made possible in part by the New Jersey Historical Commission, a division of cultural affairs in the Department of State, through a grant administered by the Union County Division of Cultural Affairs. We have permission to enter the Woodruff House and the Cannonball House. We will tell the story of the Belcher Ogden House and Liberty Hall from the exterior of these two historic sites. Jean Ray Turner received a Bachelor of Science degree from Trenton State College and a Master of Arts degree at Trenton Teachers College, Columbia. She has been a reporter for the Elizabeth Daily Journal and the Citizen newspapers. She has written Along the Upper Road, the story of Hillside, New Jersey, co-authored with Charles Aquilina, Richard T. Coles. Elizabethtown in Union County, A Pictorial History, the archived photograph series of Elizabeth and Newark. She has interviewed many prominent citizens during her career as a news writer. Currently, she serves as Secretary of the Union County Historical Society. Jean Ray Turner. Take this.
Whoops. Unlike thousands of immigrants to this country, the people who settled here were second generation or even third generation Americans. They came first from Massachusetts to Connecticut, the eastern end of Long Island, and finally in 1664 to Elizabeth, or Elizabethtown. The people were all Congregationalists, or the Independent, or the Church of Christ, and their parents left England for religious freedom, usually for themselves, not for all people. Most of them were very young. There was only one who was 56, and that was John Ogden, who had the lumber mill. The people were called the Associates, and land was distributed over a period of years in 3 parcels to each of the Associates. Some of them, one parcel was the Meadowlands, the second one was a town lot on Water Street, which is now Elizabeth Avenue in Elizabeth, and the third was a timber lot. And this piece of property that was owned by the Woodruffs would have been timber lot. The people who had the timber lots had to clear the timber off of them to make gardens. They usually put up a shed of some sort, which would house their tools as well as give them shelter against the weather if it stormed while they were working their farms here. As their families grew, they started turning the sheds into houses. Now, there's a debate about this one. Some people feel that the first portion of this house was the 1.5-story section here at the west. But usually in the farm communities, the center section would have been the original section. It was one room plus a loft above it. And everything in the family took place in that one room. The cooking, the training of children, the sleeping of the adults, and the children were put in the loft above. The As the families grew, the houses grew, and so that there was a shed at the back of the room where the kitchen facilities were put after they were moved out of the fireplace, and the addition was added with several more rooms. It doesn't look it, but the house now contains 12 rooms. In the mid 1970s, an apartment, 4 rooms, was put on the second floor of the taller addition. The section of the house which is at the easterly side is the Eaton store, which is relatively new. It was built in 1900 for Mrs. Woodruff, who at that time thought that she could sell her apples at the store. It wasn't too successful, and it went to the Eaton family, which ran it for several years. After that, it was an art studio and used as a variety of things until the museum took it over in 1978 and cleaned it out. There were 2 John Woodruffs who were associates. No one is certain as to what their relationship was. They may have been father and son, cousins, or uncle and nephew. One of them originally owned this land. There are many places in the area, including the next block over, which are named for the Woodruff family because they owned property there. That is Woodruff Place, and there's a duplex house on it, which at one time was the cider mill. And the area had many, many apple trees, and I'm told by one of the old residents that the cider in the Woodruff cider mill was among the best in the area. The habit of naming something Woodruff's Farms or Lyons Farms was an old one. They would take the name of the family which was predominant and refer to it as a section. The sections, except for the boundaries of the land for ownership purposes, had no boundaries at all. So this area right here would be Woodruff Farms, but down the street near the dam would be part of Lyons Farms. And Lyons Farms would be as close to us as Cove Avenue is to us, where the Hillside Presbyterian Church is today. Williams Farms was where Roselle and Roselle Park are. Headley Farms was the area along the Rollway River, which is now Vauxhall and Union. And Connecticut Farms was also named Wade's Farms because there were a number of Wade families in the area. One of the John Woodruffs had land adjacent to the Belcher Ogden house, which you will be going to soon. There also was a Woodruff's Creek in Elizabeth that ran into the Arthur Kill. And Hillside has a Woodruff Avenue a few blocks in back of us. And Elizabeth has a very straight, narrow road, which probably isn't that old, called Woodruff Lane, but it must have bordered some of the Woodruff land at one time. And Union Township has a street off of Galloping Hill Road named for the Woodruffs. There are several Woodruff houses in addition to this one. Down Salem Avenue, there is one that was built shortly after this one, probably by one of the brothers of this house. And in back of me, down Conant Street, there's a red house that was built in 1845 by a Timothy Woodruff. They are both still in private hands. In addition to having been built in several stages, this house has a 20th century block garage, which was built about 1913 and has been turned into an archival center. And a replica of the original Woodruff barn. There were several Woodruff barns, and when I first started working for the newspaper, it seemed as though a Woodruff barn were always being burned. George Coyne Woodruff, who wrote the history of Hillside, in 1932 also taught riding and took people for rides along the area, now the Woodruff area for the Conant Street Park. We will now go inside the house. This is the room in which most of the living was done during colonial times. The cooking was at the fireplace, which used a wood fire. To the right, we have a walking spinning wheel. Women were always busy doing something, and they had to make the material for their dresses and for the men's pants and so on and so forth. Over here at the left is a flax spinning wheel, and next to it is the winder for the wool. On the side is a dry sink, which has a pitcher plus a bowl, because there was no running water in this house, and the water would have to be gotten either from a stream or a well, carried into the house and put in the pitcher, and then in the morning the person who came down would pour the water into the bowl, wash his face and hands, and be ready for the day. On the table, you'll notice there was a bowl of fruit, and all of the fruit was grown on the property. Everything in the house was to make living better. Look at the ceilings and you'll see the wide beams. And hanging from the beams are the herbs which are grown and dried for use to season the food. Also, you'll notice a kerosene lamp, which was the only lighting that this house had for many, many years. Everything in the house was made by the people. As more and more craftsmen came into Elizabethtown, of course, they started making very nice furniture. But the original furniture was made pretty much by the homeowners after 1730, when the house was settled. This is a unique rope bed. Instead of having an inner spring and a mattress, you have the ropes holding the mattress, and the mattress would have been straw. And every year, the farmer would go out and cut fresh straw for the bed. And incidentally, it wasn't too hard to sleep on. You'll notice that there are some potties under the bed because there were no toilets in the house, and every morning somebody in the household had to clean them out. Frequently, they would just go to the window and throw out whatever was in them. In most of the houses, there were bed warmers where they would put hot coals or wood into the container from the fireplace and then put them in the bed to warm up the sheets before the people got into the bed. Incidentally, this house had no central heating until 1981, after the Hillside Historical Society had taken it over. Now we will go down to the Belcher-Ogden house in Elizabeth, which was the home of 2 governors.
We're at the Ogden-Belcher Mansion in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Dr. Robert Freelington, retired professor and teacher of American and New Jersey history, Kean University, has served as president of the Union County Historical Society, will conduct this part of our tour. He's also a trustee and author of the archive photograph series Cranford, a contributing writer of Historical Journal in celebration of our 175th birthday, Township of Union, 1808 to 1983, and is a noted authority on Union County and New Jersey history. Bob Freelington.
Thank you. Here we are on this rather windy day in front of one of the oldest, certainly one of the most beautiful homes, not only in Union County, but in New Jersey. The land that the house sits on dates back to 1660, was one of the original grants after Elizabeth was settled. It was owned by John Ogden Jr., who lived here. It's a beautiful home, Georgian style, has Flemish bond brickwork in front. and it became the home of Royal Governor of New Jersey, Jonathan Belcher. I think it's interesting to note that Theodore Thayer, some 40 years ago, when he wrote his wonderful book on the early history of Elizabeth, called As We Were, opened the book with a chapter not on the coming of the Europeans to Elizabeth, but rather on the history of this house, a description and history of the Belcher-Ogden house, because he felt it symbolized and illustrated best the early history of Elizabeth. Jonathan Belcher, who was royal governor and who lived here, was from Massachusetts. He was born in Massachusetts, graduated from Harvard, went to Europe, lived in Europe for several years, came back, went into business, made a fortune for himself, had good political connections, and was appointed royal governor of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Like so many royal governors, he got into difficulty with both the home country and the people he was governing, and he was dismissed as governor in 1741. He continued, he rebuilt his reputation, rebuilt his political connections, and in 1747 he was appointed royal governor of New Jersey and took up residence in Burlington, not in Elizabeth, but in Burlington. However, he was quite well received in Elizabeth because he was a Presbyterian, and at that time there were political difficulties, not religious in nature, but had religious overtones, since the Elizabethtown associators were primarily Presbyterian, and the group that they were struggling against politically were primarily Anglican, and the Elizabethtown associators felt that Belcher would be, as a fellow Presbyterian, would be on their side. While Belcher was living in Burlington, he became quite ill, seriously ill, and the doctors recommended that if he were near salt air, his health might improve. Now, one doesn't ordinarily think of Elizabeth as being near salt air, but this was the place he chose, and the mayor of Elizabeth made arrangements for him to move into this house behind us, and he came here. We think of moving from Burlington to Elizabeth today. It'd be a rather lengthy process, perhaps, but Belcher required 3 ships. He moved by water, and the 3 sloops carried his furniture and personal belongings here to Elizabeth. Because he moved here, the seat of royal governance in New Jersey was now centered in Elizabeth, and out of respect to the governor's failing health, the provincial legislature actually met here in New Jersey for the last 2 or 3 years of Belcher's life. Interestingly, Belcher found the inhabitants of New Jersey, as he put it, rustic and without education. So he determined to help educate them as best he could, and he played a very vital role in founding the College of New Jersey, which today we know as Princeton. As a matter of fact, Princeton, or the College of New Jersey, was so grateful they offered to name the building that they built after Belcher. He very magnanimously declined the honor, and they named it Nassau Hall. One wonders if they had named it Belcher Hall, what the subsequent history would have been. The college became known as Nassau and was called Nassau, and if it had been called Belcher College, maybe the history would have worked out a bit different. Belcher died in 1757. By the way, his funeral sermon was preached by the Reverend Aaron Burr, who was president of the College of New Jersey at the time, to show how precarious life is. About 10 days later, Burr himself died from smallpox, which he contracted and died in that very brief period of time. We're now in the back of the Belcher-Ogden house, and you can notice the beautiful brickwork on the wall. Camera pick it up. And the residents lived here. And then in 1797, the house was purchased by Aaron Ogden. Now, Aaron Ogden was not a direct descendant of John Ogden, the original owner, but he was related. The Ogdens, very prolific family, and there were Ogdens throughout the Elizabethtown area. Ogden was a graduate of the College of New Jersey. He was a soldier in the Revolution, very distinguished military record. He became one of the leading lawyers in the state of New Jersey after independence, and he became a U.S. Senator in 1801. He was elected governor. He was leader of the Federalist Party. He had opposed the War of 1812 and was actually elected governor on a peace ticket. So he was the second governor to live in the house. Perhaps the thing that Ogden is most remembered for is he was a participant in one of the most noted Supreme Court cases that was ever heard in this country. The case of Gibbons versus Ogden. His opponent in the case was a man named Thomas Gibbons. Thomas Gibbons was originally from Georgia. He was a tremendously wealthy man, one of the wealthiest men in the country at that time, came to Elizabeth. He had been on the wrong side in the American Revolution. He had supported the British cause and lost his right to vote and hold office, but he obviously had good political instincts because he mended his fences, got back in, actually served as mayor of Savannah, came here. The fight between Ogden and Gibbons is so very, very involved. It's really impossible to get into and make much sense of it in a brief period of time. But it involved steamship rights on ferries going between Elizabeth and New York City, and ultimately the case went to the Supreme Court. Gibbons was a vindictive sort, and he swore he would ruin Ogden, and he did. Unfortunately for Ogden, the court held for Gibbons in the case, and in the case of Gibbons versus Ogden, the Supreme Court for the first time ruled on the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution and ruled that only Congress had the right to control such things as interstate shipping. They took a very broad view of the Commerce Clause. Ogden ultimately went broke. He lost everything. He lost this house, lost everything, and ultimately was imprisoned for debt in the state of New York. It was a very brief stay. His childhood friend, Aaron Burr, actually got the New York legislature to pass a law saying that veterans of the American Revolution could not be imprisoned for debt. So Ogden got out of jail free in that case. All right, this is the finish here at Belcher-Ogden House. Next stop will be Liberty Hall in Union.
We're at the Visitor Center at Liberty Hall. The Visitor Center, Liberty Hall Foundation opened Liberty Hall to the public about 3 years ago. The blue house that you see in front of me was formerly a Woodruff house built sometime in the early 1800s and stood on Morris Avenue next to Shearing Corporation. In 1988, they moved it inside to its present location.
We're now at the rear of Liberty Hall, one of the great historic houses of the United States. In a few moments, we'll walk around to the front of the house. But from the rear, you can see all of the additions that were made to the original building. There's some 50 rooms in the house now, and originally there were 14 when the house was first built in 1772. We'll take you around to the front and talk more about the house and its many very outstanding inhabitants. We're now at the front of this beautiful home, Liberty Hall. Just behind me to my left, this giant chestnut tree was planted by one of Governor Livingston's daughters more than 200 years ago. The house was built in 1772 by William Livingston. Livingston only lived in New Jersey 17, perhaps 18 years, but in that time he became one of the giants, probably the giant of all New Jersey history. Originally from New York, Livingston was a member of one of the most distinguished and aristocratic families in colonial America, the Livingstons of Livingston Manor. He himself was educated, became a lawyer. He was a man of many dimensions, many abilities. He edited a newspaper. He was known as a very deft satirist. He was a poet of some accomplishment and an excellent politician. In 1742, William Livingston married Susanna French of New Brunswick, New Jersey, and ultimately they had 13 children, 9 or 10 of whom grew to maturity. Livingston had a very significant political record in New York. He was a member of the Provincial Congress there, and before he was 50, he decided after some political setbacks that he would retire. He'd move to New Jersey and pursue the life of a gentleman farmer. So in 1772, he built this beautiful home here, planted an orchard, laid out the grounds, and delighted in showing visitors his prized vegetables and fruits that he produced here on the farm. But if he contemplated a life of ease, he was to be disappointed. At the time he moved here, troubles were beginning with the mother country, England, and Livingston took an active part. In 1774, he was elected to the first Provincial Congress from Essex County. What is now Union County was then part of Essex County, and he was elected again following year. He resigned, however, in 1776 in order to become the general for the New Jersey militia. Of all Livingston's activities, this was the one he probably disliked the most. After independence, Livingston resigned from his militia role and was elected governor of New Jersey by the state legislature. He was reelected and served 16 one-year terms in the legislature. During the war, he provided outstanding leadership for New Jersey. Of all the wartime governors, Livingston certainly was the best. The only one that can compete with him at all would be Governor Clinton of New York. But his outstanding leadership earned him the respect of Washington and the other revolutionary leaders, certainly earned him the respect of the residents of New Jersey because he kept being reelected. Ironically, two men who opposed him as candidates for governor were fellow citizens from Elizabethtown. One was former General Elias Dayton from the Revolutionary War. The other was Abraham Clark. It's ironic that Abraham Clark and William Livingston, two of the great revolutionary figures of New Jersey history, really couldn't abide one another. They had very little use for one another. In the 1780s, Livingston was among those who urged revision of the Articles of Confederation, and he was a participant in the Federal Convention 1787 and supported the New Jersey plan, which was put forth by William Patterson. He then helped broker the compromise that ended up with the United States Constitution, and he signed the Constitution in 1787 along with David Brearley, William Patterson, and Jonathan Dayton. Livingston died in 1790. It's kind of difficult to figure why William Livingston is not better known in national histories than he is. He was one of the great figures of the Revolutionary era, and yet he does not seem to be as appreciated now as he was then. Alexander Hamilton, who was no mean witness, said that Livingston was one of the 5 great Revolutionary War figures. I suppose in passing should mention that here at Liberty Hall, 3 of Livingston's many children lived, 3 daughters. They were known as the 3 Graces. I'm not sure who entitled them the 3 Graces, but they were. Sarah, the eldest of the 3, married John Jay, former President of Congress and the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Susan married John Cleves Sims, a federal judge, legislator, a great land speculator who at one time laid claim to 1 million acres of land in the Ohio Territory. After Livingston's death, his son owned the house for a short time, then sold it. It went through a succession of owners, and finally in 1811, a niece of Governor Livingston bought the home, Susan Livingston Kane Niemcewicz. I hope my Polish pronunciation is adequate. Susan had married John Kane, and he had died, leaving her a widow. She remarried Julian Niemcewicz, Count of Ursino, who was a Polish refugee, Polish revolutionary who came to this country. And at that time, they renamed the house, or actually a short time later, her son, Peter Kane, renamed the house from Liberty Hall, named it Ursino. And it was here then that the Kane family came in and have produced innumerable business leaders and political leaders in the state of New Jersey. 2 of the more distinguished of the political leaders were John Kane, who was both a congressman and a senator from New Jersey, and his brother Hamilton Fish Kane, who was born and raised here, did not live here as an adult, but he did have some interest right across the street on the present campus of Kane University. The so-called Kane farm buildings were erected by Hamilton Fish Kane. Robert Winthrop Kane was the son of Hamilton Fish. He was a longtime congressman from New Jersey. His son was governor, and the governor's son is currently a state senator. So the Kanes have left an indelible imprint on the political life of New Jersey.
Welcome to the Cannonball House. This house was built only a few years after the Woodruff House, but belonged to people of completely different economic circumstances. It's very much like a painting of the John DeWitt House, which was in Elizabeth, and DeWitt was the mayor of Elizabeth. The house is a Georgian colonial house with a center stairway and a center door, 2-family, and it had various conditions that were quite different from those of the Woodruff farmhouse. It belonged to Dr. Jonathan Dayton, who was related to Colonel Dayton and also the Jonathan Dayton who signed the Declaration of Independence. The house was used during the Revolution at the Battle of Springfield as a hospital by the British, and therefore it was not damaged. Only about 5 other houses in the community were allowed to remain standing. The rest were burned along with the church when the British retreated. The site is on the road to Morristown, where Washington kept his stores. And twice the British attempted to reach Morristown in 1780 and capture the stores. The first time was on June 7th at Connecticut Farms, when they were stopped at the Rahway River by Colonel Elias Dayton, and subsequently retreated to Elizabethtown Point, where they sat for 2 weeks waiting for the General Clinton to arrive. He did not arrive, and Kniphausen, who was the general in charge of the troops, decided that he would attempt to get to Morristown, because he understood that the troops were on the verge of mutiny and that they were very unhappy, and he figured that they would surrender. Unfortunately, during the Battle of Connecticut Farms, Hannah Ogden Caldwell, the popular pastor's wife, James Caldwell, was killed, and the area was enraged. So that when the old cannon sounded up on First Mountain, alerting people that the British had started and the Hessians had started marching, the militia came from everywhere. And they kept coming all day. And they stayed in the hills above Springfield. In the meantime, Kniphausen came up to Connecticut Farms, and then after passing Connecticut Farms, he divided his army into 2 parts. One part went on Vauxhall Road, the other part came up what is now Morris Avenue, in a 2-pronged attack. They were stopped at the east branch of the Rahway River, and they were stopped again at the Rahway River here. Then they managed to, the planks had been removed from the bridges on both rivers. They waded through, and they continued into the village and went to the church, which is just beyond us, which they burned. It was during that battle that James Caldwell, the pastor, went into the church and got the Watts hymnals and used them for wadding for the guns, and said, "Give 'em Watts, boys, give 'em Watts." They attempted to go through Van Winkle's Bridge, which was about another half mile up the road from the Rahway River Bridge, and again the planks had been removed. They looked up at the mountains and they saw all of the militia on the mountaintop under Nathaniel Greene and Jonathan Elias Dayton, and Kniphausen decided that it was time to retreat. And so after a 3-hour battle, they retreated back to Elizabethtown Point, and instead of camping at the point again, they crossed on a bridge of boats into Staten Island. And it was the last major engagement of the Revolutionary War in the North.
The New Jersey Historical Commission on Historic Sites placed this sign here. Battle of Springfield, here June 23rd, 1780. 1,500 Americans under Greene and Dayton were attacked by 5,000 British and Hessians under Clinton and Kniphausen, en route to capture stores at Morristown. The British burned Springfield, but were defeated. We will now enter the Cannonball House. We are most fortunate to have Margaret Vandrowski, president of the Springfield Historical Society, with us to conduct a brief tour of the Cannonball House. Margaret.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome to the historic Cannonball House. You're in the center hall of this 8-room colonial that was built approximately 1740. And some of the items of interest that we have in this center hall include a portrait of Major General Nathaniel Greene, the hero of the Battle of Springfield. we have on this wall, here we have a photograph of the Hurd family. The Hurd family purchased the Cannonball House property in 1896, and they retained ownership of it until after the Second World War. It came into the ownership of the Springfield Historical Society in 1955. We also have in the hallway a facsimile of the earliest map of Springfield, which is dated 1764, showing all the house lots. We have a facsimile of the membership list of the First Presbyterian Church from 1792, the year after the building was reconstructed. And we also have a facsimile of the meetings, the minutes of the first Township Committee meeting from April 14th, 1794. In this case, we have the cannonball that hit the house during the Battle of Springfield on June 23, 1780. It was fired by the Americans, fired by Israel Shreve's regiment from the western side of the house. Also in this case, we have a musket ball. I don't know if you can see it in this little container here. That was only discovered a couple of years ago during some archaeological digs in town. It was also an American fired by the Americans during the Battle of Springfield. And we also have the key, the original front door key to the First Presbyterian Church that was burned during the battle by the British during their retreat, and some nails which were from that church. These relics were pulled from the ashes of the church after the battle. We also have another interesting relic in this case, a tin badge with the number 42 painted on it. We originally thought that this was the pew number from the minister, the pastor Jacob Van Arsdalen at the First Presbyterian Church in Springfield at the time of the battle. But we have since learned that there's an excellent possibility that it may be a regimental badge from one of the British participants in the battle, a member of the 42nd Regiment of the Black Watch, who fought here in 1780. In this room, we have an original fireplace from the 1740 construction of the house, which has been filled in to stabilize the building. And this room is now a library which holds the genealogical records of the Sons of the American Revolution and the Daughters of the American Revolution groups. In this room, the dining room, we have several interesting relics from the history of Springfield, including some samplers that were done by family members of early settlers. But the most interesting feature in this room is the fireplace. The house was hit by the cannonball on June 23, 1780, on the outside of this wall, and if you look at it today, you'll see a replica of that cannonball hanging there. The cannonball remained in the foundation of the house until the entire building was raised up in 1921 to dig a basement underneath, at which time the cannonball, now on display in the parlor, was recovered from the walls of the house. In the 1970s, the students at Florence Gardner School here in Springfield, the 7th graders, received some grant money, and they used that money to research and recreate here in the Cannonball House their interpretation of a typical 18th century kitchen and a children's room, which is on the 2nd floor. This is the result of their work. We have in here a number of interesting antique items relating to domestic life in the 18th and 19th century. And we also have in here several relics from the Baltus Roll farmhouse. You might be familiar with that name because that was located on the property which is now the golf course, Baltus Roll.
In conclusion, I would like to thank Margaret Bandrowski, President of the Springfield Historical Society, Dr. Robert Fridlington, Jean Ray Turner, William Froelich, a lifelong resident of Elizabeth and Roselle, New Jersey. William is president of the Roselle Historical Society and serves as a trustee of the Union County Historical Society. He has participated in many important historical events and celebrations that have taken place in Union County and the state of New Jersey. He is an outstanding photographer and video cam operator. He has been performing the tasks of camera work and duplication of videotapes. Ruth Froelich, his wife, is also a lifelong resident of Union County, New Jersey. wife to William Froelich, and shares his interest and enthusiasm for studying New Jersey and American history. She's a past president of the Union County Historical Society and currently serves as a trustee. She has also served as an officer of the Roselle Historical Society. Thanks to all.